We're capping off another great year of reviews with easily one of my most anticipated movies of the year. Robert Eggers, who I've come to appreciate as a director more and more after seeing his work with The Northman, decided to do a remake of the classic vampire film from 1922, and the results were mostly good, but I'd be lying if I said aspects of the film didn't leave me wanting more. Let's discuss.
I watch so you don't have to.
Before I get started, I'd like to kindly ask that you hit the like button, and please subscribe to the channel for more content just like this.
What are you waiting for, huh? What are you waiting for?
In the 1830s, an estate agent travels to Transylvania for a fateful meeting with Count Orlok. In his absence, his new bride, Ellen, is left under the care of a close friend. Plagued by horrific visions and an increasing sense of dread, Ellen soon encounters an evil force that is far beyond her control. So for those of you who may not know, the original 1922 Nosferatu was basically an unofficial adaptation of Bram Stoker's Dracula. Because of this, both stories share a lot of similarities. And as I was watching the remake, I couldn't help but be reminded of that meme. You know, the one where it's like, hey, can I copy your homework? And then they respond and they're like, sure, but just make it look like you didn't copy my homework. Now, I don't say this as a way of undermining the significance of the original. I say this because for those who are unaware of the situation around these stories, if they went into this movie blind, they might be confused as to why it looks familiar, but it's simply not just called Dracula.
What the hell am I looking at? When does this happen in the movie?
Listen, the original silent film filmmakers did just enough to avoid those copyright laws, and I get that. That being said, I think there's enough to differentiate between the two stories, just enough to make both stories worth telling. I think the biggest and most obvious difference comes in the form of the title character. Count Orlok, or Nosferatu, is played by Bill Skarsgård this time around, and it's safe to say that if I didn't know this was Bill Skarsgård going in, that I wouldn't have been able to tell based on his performance and appearance on screen. Bill once again disappears into the role, and similar to how he did with Pennywise, I feel like he does make it his own. Count Orlok is very much more of a monster than his Dracula counterpart. Where Dracula has a more sophisticated side in both his appearance and demeanor, I always found Count Orlok to be a bit more feral and animalistic. He is supposed to be this literal walking personification of a demon.
Purely and simply evil.
Which brings me to my first minor issue with the film, in that I'm not sure I'm 100% on board with his more grounded and human design this time around. I mean, it wasn't terrible by any means, but it felt like his appearance sometimes didn't necessarily match the character. The original Count Orlok had a very distinctive look that inspired many movie monsters after him. The updated version had a very human appearance, especially in his face, even if he did have more odder features elsewhere. He even had a hellacious porn stash that made him look like Tom Cruise when he dressed up as a Russian soldier in Mission Impossible 4. I understand and support making alterations to the design to make the character unique to your vision, but I have to admit I much prefer Count Orlok's original design over the one we get here. Outside of that, the character is an absolute menace who haunts his victims in both the spiritual and physical world. Willem Dafoe is an absolute standout of the film, which should come as a surprise to no one. He plays a very Van Helsing-esque character in this movie, but his performance had the right blend of seriousness and humor that kind of made me wish he had more screen time. But he does do the most with what he is given. I also felt like Lily Rose Depp did an amazing job as Ellen in the film. They really do ask her to do a lot in this movie, and I think she moves through the phases of her character effortlessly. She can play the wholesome new wife who desperately wants her husband to stay with her. And you can also see a dark side in her that comes into play in the film when she becomes the object of Orlok's desires. The way that she contorts her body or changes her facial expressions in reaction to all of the awful shit going on around her or to her is definitely a performance worth praising. As far as the rest of the cast goes, I don't really think there was a lot there to write home about. If I'm being honest, a lot of the secondary characters felt kind of one note and forgettable, which isn't the end of the world. But it does impact how you react as an audience member when horrific things start to happen to these people, because those moments really didn't resonate with me as they should have.
I don't care!
Which brings me to the look and feel of the film, and make no mistake about it, this movie is beautifully shot. The combination of how the camera moves or doesn't move, mixed with the haunting score, just creates this hypnotic feel to the entire film. I also really dug the locations as well. It gives the film a gothic feeling that it needs. There's something about old castles, dense forests, and cobblestone streets, mostly covered in a blanket of white snow, that creates a perfect atmosphere for a horror movie like this. In fact, I would say that the atmosphere and the set design in general is probably the highlight of the movie for me.
I like it a lot.
As far as the more horror elements, this is another thing that kind of left me feeling underwhelmed. Because I just didn't feel the tension in some of these scenes at times that I knew I was supposed to. Although I will say that Orlok's boat ride was infinitely more effective in 2 scenes than it was in the entire movie in Last Voyage of the Demeter. There are also moments where it feels like the film is supposed to be unsettling due to the strange imagery they are showing us, but these moments didn't feel quite as abstract or as infectious as I would hope they would. In fact, a lot of these visuals felt kind of safe, which I think is a missed opportunity to a degree.
We were on the verge of greatness. We were this close.
Bottom line, I liked Nosferatu a lot, but I didn't love it as much as I thought I would. I think it deserves a lot of praise from a pure filmmaking perspective, from a visual perspective, but I did feel a bit underwhelmed by some of the characters and some of the horror elements. Also, I definitely consider this movie more of a slow burn, which is a type of movie that I actually tend to prefer. I'm always good with it, as long as it's leading to something, as long as the payoff is there.
That makes sense.
And I'm just not sure the finale of this movie is the satisfying conclusion that made everything worthwhile. I mean, it was almost that, but it felt like something was missing. There were moments of this movie where I was locked in, and there were other moments where I kind of checked out. I mean, I felt like it was a fine ending. I get why they ended it the way that they did, but I do think it has the potential to feel anticlimactic to someone who is expecting a bit more of an energetic conclusion. Nosferatu to me was a well-made but still flawed experience, and that's why I'm going to give it the Cathouse.
Saved by kitty litter.
Y'all be cool. Right on.